I get a lot of questions right now if I sprayed atrazine or if I sprayed Caprino or Halex GT on my corn, can I come back in and plant beans? Okay, so that information is back there as far as months from a rotation interval. Obviously, we won't have 8 or 9 months to wait on that, right? So I guess I'll just start with that. So let's talk about, and if I miss one, I would rather for this to be an informal discussion because I really didn't plan on saying anything or just answering a bunch of questions. So for atrazine, all right, so the atrazine label says following year, you can replant the beans, right? All right, so what happens, and I don't know every situation that all of y'all have had, but if you're in the river channel there and the water's been up, it's moving a lot of sediment with the water, right? So most likely, a lot of whatever you put out is gone, okay? Now, problem with that, it comes up slowly, so it also goes down before it leaches out, okay? So likely there is still some in the soil profile. I wish I could tell you how much you had in your field, but I can't. What I can tell you is atrazine, how does it degrade? How do you lose atrazine? So microbial degradation. Microbes in the soil break down atrazine. If you've had corn or grain sorghum in your fields in the past several years, within the past 5 years, and you've used atrazine every year, that microbial degradation is going to increase drastically, which means it breaks it down faster, okay? And what we're seeing where we do weed control plots is I'm only getting, from a residual weed control standpoint with atrazine, I'm only getting 2 weeks with a couple quarts of atrazine. Doesn't sound like very much. And that's when we're looking at grasses, pigweeds. Morning glories is a little different story. It seems like we're getting a little more increased residual from morning glories than we are some of the others. Now, trying to relate that back to soybeans, which is probably what we're going back to, I'm guessing, within most of these fields. Problem is soybeans are fairly sensitive to atrazine, so it doesn't take as much to damage a soybean as it would to kill maybe a pigweed or some grass or something like that. Okay, so if I'm standing here telling you from the label, it says you can't replant your beans. That's what it says on the label. But basically what that means is if you plant them and they come up and they get injured, you're liable. You've spent your money. It's not necessarily an off-labeled application, but you've spent your money, you've got damaged beans, it's not going to produce the crop you want. If you want to be super safe with it, you can take some samples, put them in a quart jar, put them in a pot, something you've got around your house, plant a few seeds in that pot and just see what the beans do. If they come up and they look good, it's probably all right to plant it. If you want to be safe and do a test before you just drop in there and plant. But what my gut tells me is I think we'll be all right on the atrazine deal. Just based, if you've had atrazine there in the past, you got the water on it with all the rain, it's likely leached or moved away because it's very water soluble, okay? Dual's the same way. Now, the one I have even a bigger question about, if I've done atrazine and then I also did something like Halex, which has Callisto in it, or Caprino, which has an ALS type herbicide and another HPPD similar to Callisto. If you have both of those out, beans are super sensitive to those HPPDs like Callisto and Caprino. So I'm really more concerned probably with those two than I am with the atrazine at this point, if you've had atrazine down in the past. But you're not going to know until you plant it. I can't just sit here and tell you it's all going to be okay. It might be. But then again, it just depends on how much is moved out of that field and how long it's been since you put it out. That's kind of what it boils down to. But like I said, in either one of those cases, get you some soil out of your field, put it in some pots around the house, plant you a couple seeds in each pot, 2 or 3 seeds or whatever. They should be poking up out of the ground in 5 days or something like that, poking up out of them pots in 5 days. Give it a little bit of time. By 2 weeks, you should know if you're going to get any injury or not on those beans and what they're going to look like. So anyway, I know that's probably not what y'all want to hear, but anyway. Yes, sir. Hank?
You put out dual and you want to put out dual again, are you going to be off label or what's going to happen there?
For just, no. Put it out. In a year, you get 2.6 pints, I think, total of dual. And then you can also switch to Zidua, which is a similar activity. We get similar weed control out of it. You can switch to Zidua, you can switch to Warrant. So we've got a lot of options out there that we can do on beans if you don't just want to go dual. Yes?
I got some pigweeds that went underwater not as long as some of these guys for about a week.
Uh-huh.
And they're not dead.
They're not dead, they're just kind of hanging on.
They don't look good.
Right.
How am I going to tell if they're going to die or not?
Well, if they're not dead,
When they come out
when they come out of the water, they're not going to die.
Okay.
And what we're seeing with pigweed and rice, and many of you that grow rice probably seen this, pigweed don't survive very well in a continuous flood. If they're bigger, they can last longer.
Okay.
But if they're smaller and we're able to flood the rice pretty quick, we can usually don't have to even spray for pigweed and rice in the paddies. Now on the levee, obviously they're going to grow pretty good.
I've also got a different kind of question. I got some corn ground. Part of it went underwater, part of it didn't. Part of it didn't, you couldn't get to for a long time because you couldn't get to it.
Right.
It's a muddy mess, even though it's sandy ground. And I've got some, I guess the atrazine and stuff got washed out. I've got some pigweeds out there that are this tall.
Mm-hmm.
And just now being able to get to it good.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the corn is too big in the drier spots. In the lower spots, it's only this tall, and some of it's dead.
Right.
Am I going to have to run drops or something, spray 2,4-D down in the drops, or what do I need to do?
Okay, so
I've got corn
all different stuff. Yeah, that's going to be hard to manage. So your cutoffs, the two from a yield stamp, or at least the one from the yield standpoint for me is Roundup. Don't go spraying Roundup, even on Roundup Ready corn over V8 or Halex GT or anything that has Roundup in it, okay? The Caprinos, all those products that have ALS in it, usually those are around V5, okay, so 5 collars, and it's there for a reason on those, okay? The atrazine is 12 inches, right? I don't damage corn very much with, as long as I stay under that V8 range with atrazine.
Can I use some kind of drops or something?
Absolutely. Drops would be much better if you have them, yes. Or a hooded sprayer. If you got an old hooded sprayer you can do a sloppy post-direct with or something. As long as you keep it out of the whirl, you should be good.
Okay.
Some things that people don't think about, and you have to check your back and check your cultivar if it's Smart Stacks or Herculex. They're also tolerant to Liberty. Is that the only ones, Jason, that I think that's the only two. It has to be Smart Stacks or it has to be Herculex. You could do, if you're doing drops, that's fine. Liberty, you can spray it over till V7. But the pigweeds that are as tall as you said they were, I mean, you're not going to kill those with Liberty by itself. But Liberty and Callisto, Liberty Callisto atrazine, looks really good on pigweed. But now, the bigger they get, the harder they are to kill with anything. Okay, just a couple quarts of atrazine plus Halex GT in my plots. You know, I'm no different than a lot of you. We were late getting our early posts out in our weed control plots too, and I have the same situation. And I can't believe how big a pigweed I killed last week with 2 quarts of atrazine and Halex GT. But by itself, Halex by itself is not going to do it. Atrazine by itself is not going to do it. You're going to have to throw in a couple modes of action to take the pigweed out at this point. You mentioned 2,4-D and dicamba. Be careful with those two. As the corn gets bigger, you're going to injure it more.
Even if you're out of the world?
Well, if you're post-directing it, you're okay. But if you try to spray it over the top, right, and you may affect your brace roots, and you may come back and it's laying this way and that way into the middles.
And it's really too late to put even a high clear cultivator through it without pruning a lot of
Pruning roots, right. So I mean, that's a difficult, I mean, I know a lot of you are in that situation. That's just it's a difficult situation from a weed management standpoint. But if you've got drops, that's definitely the way to do it. Because you're going to get, where your corn's bigger, you're going to get much better coverage dropping it down in there anyway.
what about putting out residuals now, and it looks like it's not gonna rain for.
I've had that call 5 times already this morning, and you know, if you're a bean guy, and you're at that point where I'm going to use prefix or I'm going to use FlexStar, you know, I've got this on my little talking point deal, but don't burn your prefix and your FlexStar shot too early on these beans. Now, if you're planting beans, I would put a residual down. I mean, even if it's a cheaper residual, even if it's just dual, okay? I know Jeremy said, you know, our maximum yield is gone, so we're going to try to be managing these beans as economically as possible. Narrower rows. Of course, beds are good for drainage. I like beds, but narrower rows will help you from a weed management standpoint and allow you to get a little cheaper weed control out there because of the quicker canopy. So you're right. They're calling for a dry forecast. I probably wouldn't put the most expensive residual herbicide out there just because of that. But I would still put something in case you did catch a shower. And again, on that FlexStar, I'm having a lot of people that want to just plant the beans and spray prefix to kill the little pigweed that are up. That way I don't have to be real careful getting back into the field. You know, if my beans are starting to crack, prefix is not going to hurt them, this, that, and the other, but I would just caution you on all that because that completely takes out your in-season pigweed control in a Roundup situation. Because you only get one shot of FlexStar prefix during the season, and it's up to 1.5 pints of FlexStar, and that's it. Yeah, Hank?
What about burn down? What would you recommend on a burn down option after this part gets off?
So, you know, I know a lot of the soils next to the river may be real sandy. On sandy soils, this is not going to work as good because of the potential for injury, but I like Sharpen and Roundup. Sharpen Roundup plus Dual will give you a little more residual. Verdict is a combination of Sharpen and Outlook. And so it does a very good job. Verdict's even better than Sharpen by itself from a burn down. So if I got pigweeds, for some reason there's some horseweed out there, whatever there may be, Verdict's going to do a better job than Sharpen is by itself. Roundup plus Verdict is going out on a lot of acres right now. Plant back. And that's where I was getting to on the, so the question was, does Sharpen have a plant back? And so it's in Verdict and it's in Sharpen, the same product. 1 ounce of Sharpen is immediate on your silt loam soil, so you can plant back immediately. On your heavier mixed type ground, if you have a higher organic matter content, which you probably don't have when this water receives, but anyway, you can do immediate. If it's on a sand, that's where we have to be careful. So on a sand, it's 14 days. So if you're in that situation, Gramoxone plus a PPO inhibitor, or not a PPO, a photosynthetic inhibitor like metribuzin or something like Boundary, Authority MTZ, helps that Gramoxone translocate and get a better kill on grasses and weeds in general. So, and that will give you some of the residual that you need planting your beans. Now you have to make sure your beans are tolerant to metribuzin. If not, then just Gramoxone or a Quart of Liberty. And you know, a Quart of Liberty is almost $20. So a lot of people aren't spraying Liberty for that reason. Gramoxone, just watch the drift, because every day I get picture upon picture upon picture of Gramoxone drift, okay? It's getting late, and it'll find a corn, grain sorghum, rice, anything, pretty easy. So, but yes, so Sharpen or Verdict, Gramoxone, those are the best options right now for burning down, planting back into beans. Any other questions? Yeah, Kevin.
Since we're so late with FlexStar, make sure you keep up your records and corn next year.
Good point. So FlexStar is 10 months, or FlexStar prefix, Dawn, anything with famecifin in it is 10 months back to corn or grain sorghum, okay? So, and then grain sorghum is more sensitive than corn. Usually when I'm walking a famecifin carryover, you know, if it's just been one application in June, usually we'll only see it on the ends where it was overlapped. In a grain sorghum field, it might be a little more apparent. Actually, in my plots this year, I can pick out where we sprayed prefix in some of my milo plots this year where we sprayed it last year. So especially for grain sorghum, the potential's there. Corn, if we get a lot of rain, if you're irrigating the corn, I still don't have a problem, and I'm kind of stepping myself out on a limb here, but if we can get it out before July, I feel pretty good about it. If we get rain and we irrigate. Once we put prefix or famecifin out in July and we plan on planting corn back in that field the next year, I'm a little more concerned. Okay, so just be mindful of that, and that's another reason not to. Because here's what happens if these guys that are calling me today saying I'm going to put prefix out and plant, is that okay? They'll do that, and then once that breaks, or if we don't get a rain and they get pigweeds up and they're Roundup Ready corn, what are they going to do? What do you think they'll do? If you're a farmer, what would you do to save your crop? You'd do it again. Absolutely. I'd do it again. Now I got 2 shots, and then when the price of milo skyrockets next year, you're like, I'm going to plant milo in every field I got. And you'll remember, oh yeah, wait a minute, once that stuff comes up, I'll put 2 applications of, you might not admit it to me, but you will know in the back of your head that you put 2 out instead of 1. So anyway, just be mindful of that when we're going through all this. Jason.
What about going into some of these fields with beans and then had atrazine or Clisto on corn or grain sorghum?
Yeah.
Work up those fields or just drop back in plant? Any difference?
I would rather work them, but I know that's probably not what's going to happen. But I think if we could get a little air, a little mixture in going, I think it'd be better. I honestly think from an agronomic standpoint it'd be better too, but it will help if you can scratch it at least, break that crust up. But then we might run out of moisture, so I understand. Yep.
We've got a lot of these mare's tails that busted through the wheat this year, and this stuff's gone underwater. Any suggestions for what to do with the big mare's tail?
We have a label for sharpen as a wheat harvest aid. And that's the only thing I know that would have any activity. What are they going to burn it off, Hank, and then plant beans, or what are we going to do?
This stuff's gone underwater with all the water that's gone.
Yeah, but when yeah. So, again, at this point, the horseweed's probably pretty big. If we can break that stuff off, if you're going to till it or something, you might can break it off. In beans, if you plant Liberty beans, we can beat it back pretty good with Liberty. Again, that's an expensive option. I've seen, we've had horseweed everywhere this year. This has been another horseweed year. We've had 2 in a row. We've done some pretty good with first rate in soybeans early. 3 4/10 of first rate has done a pretty good job on the horseweed. Again, that's adding more cost. But now, if you're burning down planting the beans, that verdict at 7.5 ounces that we talked about earlier is really good on horseweed, on big horseweed too. So if I'm in that situation, I might go with the verdict, Hank, before I plant. And then if I need to come back with first rate in season, I might do it, Any other questions? I've got a few other points here. I don't know, Hank mentioned some exotic weeds. It just sounds like to me, Hank, they need to make sure to keep a good weed scientist on, on retainer or something. Yeah, I appreciate that. The things that I think that might be an issue, if you see it, that normally what we'll see in ditches or something that might be deposited in the field, there's Johnson grass everywhere in the ditches because we're not tilling the ditches right, and so we seem to have a lot of Johnson grass in the ditches. You might see more of that in your fields. You might see more giant ragweed, which is pretty uncommon in our fields that we're tilling, and it's usually a ditch weed. All these ditch weeds you see, you may see more of those in your field. You may not. I mean, it's just, who knows, But that's all that's all I see in my crystal ball immediately, Hank, I guess, on the exotic weeds and all. Let me make sure.
And you're like Jeremy, you would recommend the Liberty system?
I absolutely would recommend Liberty coming back planting beans. It just gives you more options if you need it. Doesn't mean you have to spray Liberty in them. You might get lucky. In that case, I don't mind you putting prefix down pre. Okay, because you have other options in season. But I would recommend it if you can going to the Liberty Link system. I'm making sure I've covered everything. Nobody's going to get crazy and try to plant grain sorghum behind rice or anything like that, right? Okay, that's good. Rice behind rice is fine. I don't have a problem with that. That's all I got.